Well, I like to start off with the story, if that's okay with you. So this is a beautiful picture of my son, and if you can't tell the resemblance, it's the young man to the left. Now, when he was born, I'll be completely honest with you, it was one of the most scariest things for me. You know, this is my first child. I wanted to do any and everything to ensure that he would be successful. If you can imagine, wanting to make your child better than you are. Does that make sense? And that was my main mission. And so one of our pastimes, one of the things that we love to do, and I love to share with him, was to share with him my passion and love for 80s movies, right? And so his favorite movie was The Karate Kid. And I'm not sure if, we're not talking about, Will Smith's son. I'm talking about Daniel's son, the original Karate Kid. And my son was so excited about it. He told me one day, he said, "Dad, I want to learn karate. I want to be able to do what he does." So, once again, I wanted to be a great father, I wanted to pour into his life, and so I enrolled him into Taekwondo. And this is actually a picture of him right before his first tournament. And let me tell y'all, he was so excited. I mean, he was just bouncing around. He was shadow boxing, and I love contact sports. I played football, so I was excited for him. He was very confident. He said, "Daddy, I'm going to win me a trophy." And now he didn't realize that I actually had paid for those trophies. That was registration costs. That was the registration. But yeah, that's right, son. That's right. You're going to win yourself a trophy. And he says, "Dad, I'm going to hurt him bad." Okay, good. I'm glad that you're, it's a little aggressive for my liking, but good. I'm glad that you're very confident. And he said, "Dad, I'm going to bust his head to the white meat." And I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Where did you get that from, Mama? I said, "Oh, okay, all right. I understand now." Let me tell y'all, when he got out there, when he stood against his opponent, he bowed, started to fight. He got whooped, y'all. He got whooped. Y'all laughing at my son. Yeah, he got whooped. Now, as a father who wanted all the best, who had poured into him to ensure that he was going to be successful, he faced his first failure. And as he walked back towards me, I can see it in his eyes. I could see he was going to break down, and I know he was trying to hold it in before he got to me. And he didn't make it. And he got to me, he just fell into my lap, and he said, "Daddy, I lost." And at that particular moment, I couldn't conjure up much. The only thing that I could think of was to say, "Son, I love you. You did great. You did your best, and I'm proud of you, and we'll get them next time." Now, I share that story for two reasons. One, because one of the things that I was truly scared of was not being there for my son, whatever there looked like. I just wanted to be there, to be supportive, to give him all that he needs to be able to bounce back and be a resilient, healthy child. The second reason I tell that story is because we have young people out there today, and especially young folks that may have decided to get involved with a gang. I shudder to think about who was not there for them. How did they get to that place? And so when we talk about the gang problem, I understand. Everybody knows that the gangs are a problem. Now, we may not know that it's a problem in our community, but we know somewhere there's a city dealing with gangs. I mean, let's just look at some of the headlines from August. Brooklyn teen survives 13 gunshots in a gang-related attack during broad daylight. 5 arrests in 2015 gang-related killing in Dale. Local gang members sentenced to 15 years for murder. 8 plead guilty in gang-related racketeering conspiracy case. Gang members target of a narcotics raid. Now, this was just in August. Right now, the National Gang Center has actually informed us that we have across the country over 27,000 gangs, comprising of about approximately 150,000 gang members. And out of that percentage, 35% of that total number are youth, are young people engaged in gangs. Young people. Now, you immediately may be thinking to yourself, "Oh, this is an urban problem." Out of that 850,000, 5% of them are in rural communities, in small towns. So the problem is really real. So for us, there is this notion that it's a big gang theory notion that gangs are too large, they're too big, they're too dangerous. There's not much you can do other than suppress them or arrest our way out of it or just lock them up. A well-renowned researcher by the name of James Buddy Howe, he came up with several myths about these large gangs and these large systems. And he believes that this is indeed not the case. It is the actual opposite. We cannot arrest ourselves out of the gang problem. We have to actually do the complete opposite. And so when we talk about the enormity of the problem of gangs, we cannot let it preclude any of our efforts to try to solve it, no matter how big it seems. And so for me, when we think about a gang, and if I say the word and I ask for you to think about gang members, right now you couldn't help it. You thought about some of the acts and the despicable things and the criminal activities that our gang members are engaging in. From being drug deals, extortion, intimidation, gun violence, all of those things. But I'd like for you to ask why. How did they get to this place? So I'd like for you to peel back a layer. Let's just peel back a layer and ask why. And let's look at some of the risk factors for some of those young people. We have the same young people engaging in gang activity, they're dealing with some of these things, from violent communities to substance abuse issues, to dysfunctional families, lack of meaningful relationships, and a disconnection from their community. All of those things across the board. So for me, I want to talk a little bit about my churn. Now, I'm from New Bern, so that's how we pronounce children, okay? Just to translate it for you. I mentor 17 kids, 16 boys and one young lady. All of them at some point had been exposed, had been a part of a gang, had either dropped out, had been on drugs. All of them had a list of challenges, every last single one of them. Now, for me, my engagement with these kids was always around career exploration. It was always around, what are you going to do in the next 5 years? What are you going to do in the next 10 years? And if you can imagine asking any kid about what they wanted to do in terms of a career, more than likely, just like my kids, you would hear some type of entertainment, some type of athletics, no different than my kids. All of my kids wanted to be rappers. And now I would push them. I would say, okay, well, let's think about a plan B, okay, just in case the rap thing doesn't work. And so some of the plan Bs were, well, if rap doesn't work, I'll just become a lawyer or a doctor, it's just, if this doesn't fall, if this doesn't go my way, I'll just go to med school, But one thing that I found is a common denominator for all of my kids, every last single one of them, was the disconnection to their community. That's the thing that I think was critical to understanding how we deal with the problem. I mean, what happened to this community? What happened to the community that some of us grew up in? What happened to the community where we would get excited when we saw a teacher in the grocery store? I mean, do you remember that? Going into the grocery store and you saw you would lose your mind. Absolutely. I mean, just think about it. I remember seeing Miss Jones. I would run and go tell my mom, I saw Miss Jones buying milk. Oh, it was amazing. It was amazing. Because in my mind, my teacher actually, after class would go into a closet and plug themselves back up. That's where my thinking was. But that community, the community that my parents talked about when they would say, well, we had to walk 20 miles to school in snow, up hills both ways, that community. But it was the same community that he said that if he got in trouble, he can be disciplined by a neighbor. The same community, if something happened down the street, his parents would know before he even got home. That's the community that they were talking about. And for me, I remember, when I think about my responsibility to be a part of a community that's supportive, I remember seeing this kid walk around in my neighborhood, and he would always smoke a cigarette. I tell you guys, he could not have been 13, 14 years old. Just smoking a cigarette, walking around. Now, that should tell you something. A 13 or 14-year-old walking around will walk right by an adult smoking a cigarette. So to me, I said, oh, my goodness, somebody needs to do something about this kid smoking cigarettes. And it hit me. Why don't I do something about this young man? So next time I saw him, he's smoking. I said, hey, man, you know you're not old enough to smoke, man. Let's put that down. And he said, oh, man, he just took another drag, kept on walking. Saw him again. Hey, come on, man, you shouldn't be smoking. Just ignored me. This happened about 10, 11 times. By the 12th time, this is what I saw. Hey, how you doing? How you doing, sir? What's going on? Oh, yeah, man, how the kids? They're good? He started to understand now the expectation that the bar had been raised, that wasn't accepted, that was no longer normalcy. And so when we think about the community, it really becomes something. It becomes individual focused. And so for me, the answer is really complex in dealing with this problem, okay? I'm going to give it to you. Here it is, y'all. We got to look in the mirror. It's time for us to look in the mirror and ask ourselves, what's my role in all of this? And here's the charge. And I'm going to give you the charge in a very simple way. I'll call it the 3 R's. Reach in, which is focusing in on and thinking about, this is a self-assessment. Think about your community. Thinking about what are the positive attributes to your community, whether it's now or before. And what are some of those things that you felt like really helped you become who you are today? And then think about what are some of the reasons and reevaluate why are we disengaged? Why slowly are we less involved and engaged with the young people within our community? Was it fear? Is it time constraints? Is it maybe we teach the way that we were taught, if that makes sense to you? So in other words, I was taught by looking at my parents were never engaged, so that became what I viewed community engagement. It was more about just dealing with what's in front of me. And then lastly, in our self-assessment, start to think about some of the talents that you have. Everybody in here has a gift. Everybody has a talent. What's something that you could share? So that's reach in. The second one is reaching out. Now, this is your opportunity to actually get into some actionable items. Become a mentor. Become a volunteer. Sharing your talents to a young person. Looking at opportunities to engage with them. And for God's sake, know their names. And I'm just saying, just as simple as knowing the kid's name in your community. For me, I'm always known in my neighborhood as the guy that asks you about what college you're going to. That's my introduction. That's my thing. That's my shtick, okay? If I see a kid, hey, man, what college you going to? So I saw this one kid. I said, hey, man, what college you going to? And he just ignored me completely. All right? Hey, man, what college you going to? He just walked right by me. This happened literally 3 to 4 months of me asking this young man about what college he was going to until that one fateful day. That one day when I literally saw him out the corner of my eyes. And he ran down the street to intersect with me and get in my path. And as I walked up to him, he just stood there. What was he doing? Waiting for me to ask the question. And then I said, hey, man, what college you going to? He put his shoulders back, chin up, Harvard. I said, that's beautiful, man. I gave him a dab. I said, oh, man, that's awesome. Hey, man, where's Harvard at? Oh, man. But the next time I saw him, he told me exactly where Harvard was. He pulled out a piece of paper that was balled up. And he also told me about the grades that you will need to get into Harvard. And he even told me about the male to female ratio, 8 to 1, 8 to 1. Today, now he's talking and having conversation as he applied to 2 different schools, one being Harvard, the other being Wake Forest University. He went to Wake Forest and he gave me the letter from Harvard and hadn't been opened. And he said, because I know I made it. I don't even have to look at it. So for me, the last R is the most important one. There's supporting youth advocacy, supporting education advocacy, looking for organizations in your community, and just being there and saying, how can I help? And speak up and be heard. Never let your voice die down. These are so important. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to lie to you and say that every single time. I'm not going to say that all of my kids were a success. I've actually lost 6 kids to gang violence. 6 of those 17s, and I still talk about them inclusively. My last young man died January 8th, 2004. And it's tough. I want to give up. Sometimes I even question if I'm really making a difference. But when I look at my other kids, when I look at my other churn, I have young people that have graduated from East Carolina University, other kids graduated from Howard University. I have a young man who said by 2028, he will be running for the office of the presidency. He told me that, and I believe him. I truly do. I had a young man who told me, he said, you know what? If you have an opportunity to speak to any adult, I want you to tell them something for me. So I'm going to share that with you. He said, if you, and he's referring to the folks in the audience, if you treat the children you are working with in your community or that you know in the community the same way that you treat the child in your house or your child, then we wouldn't have a problem. He told me that in 2003. My son was born in 2005, and that's when I got it. That's when it hit me. That's when the culpability, that's when the importance, that's when I understood that we have to have a sincere passion to engaging our young people and a sincere passion to ensure that they become successful. So what I'll leave you with is a greeting and a saying by the Maasai people out of West Africa. Their greeting is Kaserian Ingera, Kaserian Ingera, which means, and how are the children? Thank you so very much.